My name's Eric Landon. I'm 47, and I used to think family ties meant something. Grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, eldest of 3. Never got in trouble, always helped out around the house, walked my little sister to school when Dad got sick. I even passed on a job offer in New York after college to stay close when Mom started forgetting the stove was on. But apparently, all that made me forgettable. The envelope didn't have my name on it, just said, Caroline Landon and Benjamin Troy request the honor of your presence. No Eric, no brother of the bride, just a white square of paper with fake gold cursive and no warmth at all. Caroline is my youngest sister, always been the family favorite. Soft voice, shiny hair, the kind of southern charm you bottle up and sell. She's getting married in a vineyard outside Durham, and I wasn't invited, not officially. The envelope was addressed to current resident. I only opened it because it got slipped in with my electricity bill. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw the small handwriting on the inside flap. One line. Familiar, tight cursive. Please don't cause a scene, just let her have this. Mom, I sat with that for a while. Just sat. Staring at the handwriting of a woman who hadn't called me in 6 years. The same woman who once slapped a fork out of my hand when I called out my uncle at Thanksgiving for what he did to Caroline when we were kids. I thought I was protecting her. She said I ruined everything. I told you that in confidence. Caroline had whispered to me in the hallway that night, her face red and cold and hollow all at once. You made it public. You made me public. That was the last real conversation we had. I got disinvited from Christmas, then Easter, then eventually stopped getting group texts altogether. Meanwhile, Uncle Dean still got to carve the turkey every year. I'm not gonna lie. There were days I thought maybe I did go too far. Maybe I could have handled it differently. I replayed every second of that dinner 100 times. The way Dad stared at his plate. The way Mom looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The way Caroline burst into tears but didn't say I was lying. But here's the thing about silence. It doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it just means people are scared of truth. Scared it'll make them look ugly. That invitation was a reminder that, in their eyes, I was the one who cracked the family mirror. Still, I stared at the envelope for days. Left it on my kitchen counter next to an unopened bag of coffee and the charger cord I keep meaning to throw away. I didn't RSVP. I didn't call. I didn't throw it out either. Then one night, just after midnight, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. She's still your sister. Don't show up just to make a point. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. That's when I decided to go. Not to crash the wedding. Not to start a fight. But because I needed to look her in the eye one more time. I needed to know if she really believed I was the villain in this story, or if she just got tired of pretending the truth never happened. So I pressed my only suit, packed a small bag, and drove the 4 hours to Durham the night before the ceremony. I didn't book a room. Slept in my car at a rest stop off Interstate 40, seat tilted back, jacket over my chest like some parody of middle-aged dignity. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the vineyard's courtyard. Sunlight bouncing off crystal glasses, waiters in black aprons gliding between rows of white chairs. Everything was pristine, curated, like something off a magazine spread titled Southern Elegance. I spotted her before she spotted me. Caroline was laughing, radiant, the way brides are supposed to look. She moved between guests like nothing in the world had ever hurt her. And maybe that was true. Or maybe she just got better at not flinching. I stood still, watching, listening, waiting. I didn't need to say anything. Not yet. But when Mom turned her head and saw me, her face fell flat like a curtain being drawn too fast. She turned away. No greeting. No surprise. Just a quiet refusal to make room. I was the ghost at the edge of the frame. Again. And yet I stayed, because some stories don't end just because one side stops telling them. I didn't expect a seat. Hell, I didn't even expect to get past the security guy with the guest list in his hand and a Bluetooth earpiece, like he was guarding a Senate hearing instead of a wedding in a vineyard. But when I walked up, he barely looked at me, just motioned toward the side path like he'd been told not to cause a scene. No wristband, no welcome drink, just a silent ushering like I was a +1 no one knew how to place. There were rows and rows of white wooden chairs lined up on a gravel aisle under a pergola dripping with fabric and flowers. The whole thing looked like Pinterest exploded. Every seat had a name tag tied to it with twine and a sprig of rosemary. Except mine. Mine was the one in the back row, farthest from the aisle with no tag. Just a folded napkin. It didn't even match the others. I sat down anyway. My view was half blocked by a floral arrangement tall enough to hide a full-size groomsman, but I didn't move it. Didn't try to get a better seat or make myself seen. I just sat there, breathing in the lavender and eucalyptus, watching Caroline talk to the photographer like they were best friends. Like she hadn't once begged me not to tell anyone what had happened that night. Like I hadn't carried that secret on my back until it nearly broke me. She glanced in my direction once. Just once. Her eyes barely brushed past me like I was a shadow caught in the corner of her vision. If it hurt her to see me, she didn't show it. And if it hurt me to be ignored, I wasn't about to let it show either. People started trickling into their seats. I recognized some of them. Distant cousins, old neighbors, women from church who used to bring casserole when Dad was in hospice. Nobody said my name. A few did that thing where their eyebrows twitch like they're about to say something, then decide not to. Safer that way, I guess. The ceremony started late. 15 minutes past the time printed on the program, the officiant finally stepped out. A young guy with a beard too manicured to be trusted. He welcomed everyone, thanked the village who helped raise Caroline, and began listing names of people who'd been important in her life. My name never came up. Not once. But Uncle Dean's did. Loud and clear, followed by polite applause. Like he hadn't been the one who lit the match under this whole thing. Like the bruises Caroline showed me that night never existed. That was the moment something cracked. Not in me. In her. Caroline shifted in place. I could see it even from the back row. Her shoulders stiffened, hands twitching around the bouquet like she didn't know whether to hold it or throw it. When the officiant asked if anyone would like to offer a blessing or words of wisdom, I expected silence. But instead, Benjamin's mother stood up and gave a sweet, if forgettable, speech about love being patient and kind. A few more people followed. Toasts, jokes. A memory about Caroline baking a cake as a kid and forgetting the sugar. Everyone laughed like it was the most charming thing in the world. Then Benjamin, the groom, stood. He was taller than I remembered. Clean-shaven, confident. His voice had the calm rhythm of a man who's never had to wonder if his place at the table was earned. "I want to thank everyone who came today," he said, pausing just long enough to make people lean in. "Especially those who've stood by Caroline through thick and thin. You've helped shape the woman I love." His eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on me. And this time they didn't move. "There's someone here who probably didn't expect to be mentioned today," he said. Caroline's head snapped toward him. Benjamin kept going. "When I first started dating Caroline, there were some things she wasn't ready to talk about. Things from her past that didn't make sense to me. But then she told me about her brother." There it was. A slow murmur moved through the seats like someone had opened a door to a storm outside. "He protected her when no one else did," Benjamin said, voice unwavering. "He lost a lot for it. His seat at the table, his name in the group chat, even his photo on the mantle. But he never asked for anything back. He just told the truth when it mattered." He raised his glass. "To Eric." Half the crowd looked stunned. The other half looked away, but a few lifted their glasses. Not many, just enough. Caroline didn't raise hers. She stood there frozen, her face unreadable like it had been carved into something lovely but hollow. Then she stepped forward, walked down the aisle like she was in a trance, and headed straight for me. I didn't move. Didn't speak. She handed me something. A small photo. folded. Didn't say a word. Just placed it in my hand and walked away. I opened it slowly. It was a picture from our childhood. The three of us, me, Caroline, and middle brother Jason, sitting on the front porch, knees scraped, grins lopsided. It wasn't one I remembered being taken, but it was real. And I was in the center, still there, even after everything, even after they tried to crop me out. I didn't cry. Not when she handed me the photo. Not even later that night in the motel parking lot off I-85, where I sat in my car with the engine off, the heat fading fast, and that photo resting face up on the passenger seat like it had something left to say. I just stared at it. Not because it was perfect. It wasn't. The colors were washed out, the edges frayed. My face was slightly out of focus, mouth half open mid-laugh, hair too long. Jason had a Kool-Aid mustache. Caroline was barefoot, hugging a beat-up stuffed animal. But there we were. Together. Not cropped, not edited, not erased. I don't know what made her give it to me. Guilt? Closure? One last breadcrumb before disappearing again? What I do know is, that photo did something I wasn't ready for. It cracked something open. Because here's the thing no one tells you about being the truth teller in a family like mine. It's not the loneliness that hurts the most. It's the silence that comes after you do the right thing. It's realizing that even when the smoke clears, no one's building you a place back at the table. No one's saving you a seat. They're just learning how to function without your noise. But that photo said I was there once. That maybe, just maybe, I had mattered more than they let on. The next morning, I skipped the reception. I didn't want to watch them cut a cake I had no hand in baking. I didn't want to clap for a first dance choreographed without the brother who taught her how to slow dance in the living room when we were kids and our parents were out. Instead, I drove back to Raleigh, rolled down the windows, and let the wind do the thinking for me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, something had shifted. I didn't unpack. Just took the photo inside, slid it into the corner of my fridge door under a magnet shaped like a broken banjo, and stared at it like it was proof. Not of what happened, but that I survived what happened. Later that week, I found myself digging through a cardboard box in my closet labeled Law Stuff. The label was smug. I'd written it in Sharpie during a moment of false bravado, back when I thought I'd never want to look back. Inside were files, notebooks, old case summaries, dust everywhere. Near the bottom, wrapped in an old Duke sweatshirt, was the letter. The one from the ethics board. The one that cleared my name. It was dated 5 years ago, but I still remembered the day I opened it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at the line that read, Mr. Landon's conduct was found to be both appropriate and necessary under the circumstances. And then I put it in that box like it was a wound I didn't want to prod. But now, holding it again, after everything, I didn't feel shame. I felt something closer to relief. I'd spent so long being framed as the brother who blew up Thanksgiving, who made things complicated, who dragged skeletons out of closets and flung them into daylight. But the truth is, I never did it for revenge. I did it because Caroline told me something awful, and for the first time in our family's history, someone actually listened and acted. That was never about heroism. It was about refusing to be silent. That same week, out of nowhere, I got an email from a first-year law student. Her name was Lila. She said she'd found my old paper on mandated reporting and ethics in family law. Said it helped her push through a class that made her feel like she was drowning. I don't know if you still practice, she wrote, but your words still carry weight. That email? It hit me harder than Caroline's photo, because it reminded me that even when your family won't call you brave, even when they call you a problem, a disruption, a disappointment, there are strangers who will carry your words like a compass. People you'll never meet, who are safer because you spoke. That night, I pulled out my laptop and updated my website. I hadn't touched it in 4 years. Replaced the dusty bio, uploaded a new headshot, Changed the tagline from former family law consultant to advocate for the unspoken. It felt right. It didn't fix everything. It didn't undo the years of silence, or the holidays spent alone, or the texts that never came. Caroline didn't call. Mom didn't write. And I didn't expect them to. But I stopped waiting. And that changed everything. The funny thing about rebuilding your life is that no one claps for it. There's no ribbon-cutting ceremony when you finally sleep through the night. No audience when you choose not to text someone who's made it clear they don't want you around. It's just you, making breakfast in silence and realizing that silence doesn't hurt anymore. After I updated the website, things moved quicker than I expected. A colleague forwarded my info to a local nonprofit that worked with families navigating abuse cases. They needed someone to teach a legal ethics seminar. I said yes without overthinking it. The first session was in a church basement with weak coffee and too many folding chairs. There were only 12 people in the room. One wore a name tag that said Jen and spent most of the hour clutching a pen like it was keeping her upright. At the end, she came up to me. Said she'd been scared to take action in a case involving her sister's ex-husband. Said she'd almost stayed out of it. "But you said something in there," she told me, her voice shaking. "You said, sometimes doing the right thing won't save the relationship, but it might save someone else." That landed. I didn't remember saying it. I probably hadn't planned to. But it was true. That night, I drove home and sat in my car outside the house for nearly an hour, headlights off. I kept thinking about how many years I wasted believing silence would someday be rewarded. That if I just waited long enough, stayed kind enough, forgave fast enough, anyone would say, "You were right to do it." It never came. Not from Mom, not from Jason, not even from Caroline. But that girl in the basement? She heard me, and maybe that was enough. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a panel at Duke Law, my old law school. Just walking through those doors made my stomach clench. The last time I stood in that building, I still thought loyalty had to mean silence. That confronting pain was betrayal. This time, I walked in wearing the same suit I wore to Caroline's wedding. It fit better now. Or maybe I just stood up straighter. The panel was about moral courage in the legal profession. Most speakers quoted Supreme Court rulings or landmark legislation. I didn't. I told them about the Thanksgiving I lost everything, and the silence that followed. I didn't name names, didn't drag my family through the mud. That wasn't the point. What I said was this. When I spoke up, I didn't just lose a seat at the table. I lost the house the table sat in. And it took me years to understand that some walls aren't worth staying in. That blood doesn't make a home. Truth does. And truth doesn't need to shout to matter. The room was quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet. The listening kind. Afterward, a young guy came up. Third-year student, maybe. He said he'd been on the fence about whistleblowing in a clerkship he was doing. "You helped tip the scale," he said. I didn't ask for details, didn't need to. Later that month, I was asked to do an interview with a small legal podcast. Nothing flashy. Just a Zoom call with 2 hosts in hoodies and earbuds. But halfway through, one of them said, "Eric, I gotta ask, have your family ever reached out? Do they know how much good you've done?" I paused. "I think they know," I said. "Whether they say it out loud or not, they know." That wasn't bitterness talking. That was experience. People know when they've wronged you. They just get really good at pretending they don't. And sometimes the sharpest form of revenge isn't confrontation. It's continuation. It's showing them that your life didn't end when they turned their backs, that you didn't become bitter. You became better. Not louder, not harder. Clearer. Caroline never called after the wedding. I didn't expect her to. But one day, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photo. The same one she'd handed me at the wedding. But this version, it had a frame. And scribbled on the back in her handwriting were 6 words. I remember, I never forgot. C. That was it. No apology. No explanation, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like peace, if peace ever comes wearing real clothes. I placed the framed photo on my bookshelf, just below my ethics board clearance letter and just above the old Duke sweatshirt I could never quite toss. And every now and then, when I pass it, I think about how loud silence used to be, and how beautiful it is now. It happened on a Tuesday. I was halfway through drafting notes for a webinar on legal responsibility in family abuse cases when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Same number. Something about the persistence made my stomach twist. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end was clipped. Female. Worn down but sharp at the edges. Mr. Landon, I'm Detective Harris with the Wake County Special Victims Unit. We're reaching out because your name came up during an active investigation involving Dean Trammell. My chest went still. Uncle Dean, the man I called out a decade ago? The man who got to keep carving turkey and shaking hands at church while I was labeled unstable, dramatic, divisive. That Dean. Sorry. What did you say? I managed. She continued, calm and steady, like she'd said it 100 times to 100 other people. We have credible testimony from a former foster youth now in her 20s. She mentioned something you did, publicly, years ago. Said it was the only reason she ever told anyone what happened to her. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat loud in my ears. She said you called him out. Said you made it real. So, thank you. Then came the part that stopped the room. He was arrested this morning. Multiple counts. We'll need a written statement about what you witnessed, if you're willing. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. Absolutely. It felt like something had shifted in the air, not like a victory. More like gravity finally remembering how to pull in the right direction. The news didn't make headlines right away. Local story. No sensational coverage. Just a quiet mugshot of a man who used to smile too much at kids' birthday parties, now in a county jumpsuit. The charges were enough to stick, but what got to me most was the name listed in the complaint. Caroline Landon, my sister. She had finally spoken. Not just to me, not in code, not with a folded photo, but publicly. She gave them everything she'd remembered, down to the hallway, the carpet, the year Mom replaced the front porch light. And she didn't ask for anonymity. I sat on my porch that night, phone off, beer untouched. Just me and the cicadas. She did it. She walked through the fire I lit and made it to the other side. And this time, when people looked at her, they wouldn't just see a bride or a hostess or someone raised to keep her voice polite. They'd see what I always saw. A survivor who didn't owe anyone her silence. I didn't hear from her directly. But a few days later, an envelope showed up again. This one had no return address either. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. I hated you for so long because you made me remember. But it turns out remembering was the only way I could finally forget. See, I cried then. Not loud, not for long. Just enough to let it move through. The ethics panel I spoke on? They called again, asked if I'd consider mentoring students directly. I said yes. The podcast? They aired my episode as part of a series on quiet courage. It didn't go viral, but the comment section filled with stories from people who'd lost their families trying to do the right thing. People who still felt like ghosts at the edges of weddings and reunions and kitchen tables. They weren't alone anymore. And neither was I. You don't always get the apology. You won't always be invited back. But sometimes, just sometimes, the truth finds its own way to speak. And when it does, it doesn't need your permission or theirs. It just needs time. And when justice finally knocks, it doesn't always come with handcuffs. Sometimes it arrives in an envelope, or a courtroom, or a whispered thank you from someone who survived because you didn't shut up. If any part of this story reminds you of something you've lived through, something no one else believed, feel free to share it in the comments. You don't have to name names. You don't even have to tell the whole thing. Just show you were there. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that don't flinch or gloss over the hard parts, go ahead and subscribe. But only if you're ready for honesty. That's all I've got left to give. Thanks for sitting with me this long. I know it's not easy. Neither was the silence.